Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday, Lily.
Well, everyone, welcome back to Off the Clock Conversations with Lili and Lauren in the year of 2024.
Can't believe we're here.
I can't believe it. I can't believe it's 2024.
I know. I wasn't ready.
Yeah. I just like the number. The number 24. Listen, it's
It's
Kobe Bryant's number. You can't go wrong with the Mamba mentality in the year of 2024.
I obviously did not know that.
Just on a side note, fun fact, if the Dodgers win the World Series this year, it'll be the eighth World Series they win, which is Kobe Bryant's number, in the year of 2024, which is Kobe Bryant's other number. So the Dodgers are in the year of Kobe.
That's a lot of sports information. At the same time, and my brain might not comprehend all of that, but I'm with you.
I'm gonna need you to transition to sports mode.
This doesn't transition to sport mode. Yeah, no, we're stationary. We're a stationary vehicle.
So welcome back. Welcome back, everyone, to Off the Clock Conversations with Lili and Lauren. I think today we want to talk about transitioning and
Yeah,
transitions into like a newer version of you because new year, new me is like a thing.
it's always a thing. It always lasts. It's like from January 1st to 8th, you get that new version of yourself.
Yeah, it's a fun version of yourself. But I actually I would love talking about this with people. And I wonder what your opinion is of like what a transition feels like in a person, what change looks like, but like more so even like a basic transition feels like or looks like in a person.
We go through so many transitions during the day and like over the course of our lifetime. But I think what you're talking about is like, how do we like evolve as humans and evolve by either incorporating new like habits or characteristics. We were trying to do different things. But I think on a very basic level, even just transitioning from being eating lunch to starting this call,
Mm,
the headspace that we were in before we sat down together. There are just so many different transitions throughout the day. And I've been thinking about this a lot, particularly like in having my sister come visit, because the person I am when I have another person in the house that's not my husband or the dogs is very different. Like I feel like I'm not like, I try to perform normal
mm-hmm.
way. And so I feel like I go through different stages of myself, but on a very basic level, the transition going from one thing to another.
Yeah.
And depending on the level of difficulty, it how that actually happens is really different.
It's also interesting because what you're bringing up is like when I'm with my family versus how I am with my husband in my home, or if my family is over, like I transition to a different version of
Mm,
myself.
yes.
Right? And that version, like now I've outgrown that version. So in my day-to-day life, I'm no longer that person. But
Yeah.
like kind of the same. When Sarah's in town, you're still Sarah's sister living in the home with Sarah, transitioning into Lauren with Sarah.
Yes.
And so what have you been struggling with that transition?
I've been struggling with acting my age,
Every
and I feel like I revert.
day, Lauren.
Yeah, I feel like I become this like kind of high school version of myself, which is not my favorite version. And I can see us just like we're like side texting at dinner, like with my husband, and we're not even saying it's not even about him, but like doing behaviors that like I wouldn't normally do. Like like I wouldn't just like we couldn't wait till they like stepped outside to talk about like, can you believe that lady over there? Like just behaviors that I would never do now. it's just so tempting. And I think that like it happened so quickly that I didn't even realize I was doing it. But then I was like, I don't typically act like this. Like, we're not super exclusive. Like, Charles was like, what are you guys laughing about? And I was like, I just had an urge to be like, nothing. Why am I excluding him from the conversation? I want him there.
Okay.
So,
Charles.
yeah, I feel like relationally aggressive, but unintentionally so. There are just these ways of like, we have a certain way of being together, and that's like, I can just kind of change or shift into that.
Yeah, which I totally understand. And I think that's the piece where it's funny because I was talking to not just one, but a couple of clients this week
Yeah.
about something very similar in different forms of it. Like someone was talking about how they are such a different person at work and they wonder why they're such a different person at work. And does that mean they're fake? And then another person was talking about being around like their high school friends and how they shifted so much. And then, of course, family. And also, one person was genuinely talking about how much change they've experienced in working on themselves and now adjusting to transitioning to who they are now.
Yeah.
And so that, like, it's interesting because what I've talked about a lot this week, and I wonder what you think about like what I talked about in therapy with people and what I suggested. But I was just like, if you feel guilt
Mhm.
around the behavior, the old behavior, which is normal. So
Yeah.
normalizing that behavior, right? Because if I go into my parents' home and my mom's voice is going to trigger my brain to come back to all these old habits and patterns. And then my brother's voice is going to come in and my brother's like facial expression is going to take me to a
Yeah.
moment, right? So all these old habits and patterns, your brain is just like, okay, you're with family. This is how you behave. So I normalized a lot of like with every environment we shift because we have to adjust our social environment that we're in. And if you end up feeling guilt for a behavior, guilt is the emotion that communicates, I'm doing something that's against my values.
Yes. Yeah.
So if the guilt is coming up and then you identify like 0 to 10, the intensity, 10 out of 10, you're like way off on your values. Like 2 out of 10, keep, keep an eye on it, but like, okay, it's not the end of the world. And then adjust and shift the behavior from there, and then learning to readjust yourself in your normal environment. But I think that's the thing. Did you feel guilt when you and Sarah were side texting?
Not not immediately. I just remembered where we were and that I was out to dinner with like Charles and her, and I was like, alternatively, we could either like create a group chat. Like, I noticed that there were other options. And so it wasn't necessarily guilt. It was more, I was observing this pattern of like, it's very easy for the two of us to default
Yeah.
into what we typically do. And that it's not something I just wasn't, I feel like I wasn't prepared for it. And it's not often that it's just the three of us hanging out together.
Yeah.
So because she lives so far away, because she's on the East Coast, that I don't really run into this. And so it's been interesting as we haven't run into that as much, like just realizing how different our dynamics are in different spaces. So it wasn't necessarily guilt, it was more observing and like noticing that I could change that behavior. It wasn't like, I guess if I had been like having like a secret side text, like, I hate my husband, like there might have been guilt, but there wasn't any of that. So it was
Right.
more like just observing, like this, there's like, oh, I don't need to do this, or like we could do this differently. And so starting to just non-judgmentally be like, notice what's happening and like what could possibly change.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. The other thing is it sounds like, well, it all depends on how Charles felt in that moment, right? Like if Charles was just like, I'm feeling left out, this is ridiculous,
Yes.
I don't like
Yep.
this, then that would be a moment of change. But if Charles is like, two sisters back together, we're all out,
Yeah.
like this is kind of how, like I am present in their dynamic in this way, and I'm totally fine with it because I'm enjoying it, then I think that's the piece where change doesn't have to happen because you and your sister have a fun and unique dynamic within
Mhm.
yourselves, and Charles is the one that's transitioning into your dynamic.
Yeah. And it's so odd to think about of like these two people who are so integral into my life and how we don't have our own like kind of as like three people like hanging out together, we don't really have a dynamic yet.
Yeah,
And so when you're talking about like this idea of like the evolution of people and time of sometimes the evolution happens naturally and you're starting to like kind of figure out what works, what doesn't, and shift. And sometimes it has to be more intentional.
yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a piece where it depends on the person in the room and how each person is feeling in the room. And it's fun because we just got back from Ojai. We went up for to Ojai with two of our new friends, which was again, it's a new dynamic for us. It's a friendship that we've had for the past couple of months, but this was the first trip, an overnight trip that we had all taken.
Yeah. Which is very different. That's like a whole new
Whole
like yeah, a whole new like situation. The
And
overnight
whole new
trip.
version of you that you're trying to actually like figure out without feeling, because that's it, it's like when you create a friendship and you get that comfortable that you want to take a trip, especially at our age. At the younger age, I think we just took trips with people like
And we're like, "Oh, it's so nice to meet you. Do you wanna fly to Cabo?" I have no
you want to go
here.
to Spain? Yeah, sure, let's go. Like, and then, Mom, I'm going to Spain with who? You don't know them. I met him a week ago. What? um, but this, oh, and it was because when you meet them, you kind of get a hang of it, and then you're like, okay, you're my people. I feel comfortable being most versions of myself with you. And then when you get into your PJs, that's
Mhm.
like a different level of comfort.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's the most comfortable version of me. Like,
Well, question, are they the PJs you'd actually wear at home, or are they special PJs?
a bit TMI. It was like PJs without anything holding me up, like full on, I'm about to get ready to go to bed and just sitting there and hanging out watching TV PJs.
That is a real friendship. How
That's
do you know? Because I have, like, PJs I have in-law appropriate PJs.
yes. I have
Yeah.
in-law appropriate PJs, but and then I have like certain friends appropriate, like you're still a guest PJ. And this one, I was just like, you know what? I kind of feel comfortable to just be like, let's live in a home together for a night kind of PJ.
Yeah.
It was
That is
interesting.
that is interesting. How did it go over? Free the
Went
nipple.
really well, obviously. It was amazing. But
Yeah.
I think it was even funny because there was a point where Adriel and I even looked at each other and we were just kind of like in a sense expressing gratitude and love for each other. But more
Yeah.
so because we were like, it's nice that we can still be ourselves.
Yeah.
And it was that moment of recognition, like we are so comfortable with these people that we
Yeah.
didn't have to transition into any version of ourselves but the one that is at home.
That's amazing. And I feel like it reminds me of that concept of like people talk about like having to mask or like to perform in front of like certain people and or like to like shield or conceal an identity. And there are definitely ways in which that happens of like, yeah, there are probably like certain family members that you're, not going to share your political views with, or like certain parts of yourself that you heal, but there's like conceal to be able to maintain the status quo. And I think it's just so powerful to be able to just have that moment where you're like, I don't have to hide or try to conceal anything today.
Yeah. And I don't fear being judged, uh,
Yeah.
which means that I'm not even thinking of judging myself to fear being judged.
Yeah.
It's sorry. To transition to that though, how do you bring that transition in every version of yourself?
So there's naturally going to be parts of yourself that are more inhibited when you're at like work. There are
Yeah.
natural things where if I were like being my just everyday self, I would probably have one of the dogs in my lap and I would be audibly like kissing them. My sister told me explicitly today, actually, when we were at breakfast, she was like, you need to stop saying that you make out with the dogs. She was telling me the context in which it was appropriate to say that, not to clients, not on a podcast. I'm sorry, Sarah, I have failed you. She was telling me, she was
Sarah,
like,
she tried, man. She lasted 20 minutes.
she definitely tried. Like there are some things, behaviors that I'm not going to engage in because they would just not fit they're not appropriate to the situation.
And you'd get fired.
And I would just get, yeah, I'm like, my clients would be like, yeah, I had a weird session today. My therapist was just like staring into her dog's eyes and kissing the dog. It was pretty uncomfortable. I felt like third wheel.
Yeah, totally. Can't do that.
So to become that like most kind of relaxed version of yourself, of being able to, it's really about the audience. That's
Yeah.
the way I think about it. Of like, I've been talking a lot about actually in this like new year, new me model that like a lot of us kind of think about when we're kind of entering into like one of those markers of times is not wanting to care so much about what other people think
Yeah.
and not feeling like reduced to like our anxiety or worry thoughts of like I have to be so inhibited in order to make sure that like people like me. And
Mhm.
so one of the ways is I think to feel secure in who you are and what you're doing. And I think being able to often like something that we might call a lean in statement in exposure and response prevention is like it's okay if not everyone likes me. Like some people like me, some people don't.
Yeah.
That's okay. And so if I kind of come in with that mentality, rather than the mentality of I need to make sure that everybody likes me, I'm going to be very careful about what I do and say.
Yeah.
It's like what we were talking about a few weeks ago, like when I was trying so hard after snooping in my interviewer's notes that like I was a rapid mumbler, all of a sudden I was so concerned about how I was pronouncing everything and it completely changed my relationship to the conversation. When I'm not thinking about that, I'm not as worried and I'm able to speak more freely. And so I think that seems like the difference is like, what are we telling ourselves about the interaction?
I think the other piece that I add to that, I love that. And the piece that I add is knowing your social interaction, like where you are and the rules of
Yeah.
how, because and this is whether we like it or not, we have certain rules in certain spaces that you have to abide by. Like when I was 7 and we moved to Iran, I moved from the United States of America,
Mhm.
where we have freedom. Men and women walk on the same streets, they hold hands, like no one wears anything. There's like freedom, full freedom, right?
Yeah.
And at the age of 7, I went to Iran where I can't walk around. The rules of the country are different. The rules of the social norm, whether that social society likes it or not, which they really don't, but whether they like it or not, you have to abide by the rules. So it kind of is the same thing when I tell clients, I'm like, when you're at work, there are certain rules you have to follow. You have to show up on time. On time usually means 5 minutes early,
Yeah.
just to make sure. You have to get the work done that's within your contract that you agree upon. You have to like have a politeness and a certain emotion regulation, no matter who you work with. And then with your family, there are different kind of rules. There are different kind of things that you have to follow. And then with your friendships, and then at school, and then in your own home, and then walking to like from Venice Beach, going to Santa Monica, the rules change.
Yes. This is so interesting. And I think that we should actually probably do just a like an episode on like learning the rules because
Mm,
that's such a good point. Because a lot of like our ability to like be in different situations is like hinges on our ability to understand the different contexts we're in and how to behave based off of like what we're learning. And yeah, they're all of these situations are different. Like the etiquette on the subway in New York City is
mhm.
different than the etiquette in a shared Uber ride, which
Yeah.
is different than the etiquette in a restaurant. And we kind of, as we're starting to navigate different environments, it's a little bit hard to transition between them when we're not sure when the rules change dramatically and versus when like they're pretty consistent across contexts, which is why some people feel off. Like I definitely notice a difference. There are certain like work friends, like present company included, where I feel more comfortable like talking about like my bouts of diarrhea versus on a first time meeting somebody, I really try to like keep that to like the second time I meet someone. Like they don't need to know and
Right.
starting to learn about those like kind of norms and different interactions. Like the first thing someone hears out of my mouth should not be poop. Like it should just not be.
All of that rule went out the door at our engagement with Adriel.
Yes, I was among friends, I felt comfortable. I was like somebody who like generally who kind of knows me, who knows me by proxy is close enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to like, and that's one of the things like I know that it's always a risk if I'm not filtered in certain contexts, it's more risky. And so that's like the learning that we need to do.
And that's the piece where I like, because, well, to be fair, I'm pretty sure Adriel probably brought up the poop because both Charles and I were in the bathroom. I know my husband very well. But I think that the piece of learning how to transition or getting comfortable into each transition is curiosity to learn, one, about your own emotions and your comfort, and two, about the
Yeah.
group that you're in, the rules of it. And the
Hmm.
willingness to not fight the rules constantly. Like if the rules are really, really, really unfair and unjust and like factually against human rights, sure, that's a different story. But if you're walking in and you're like, well, I don't like the rules that my aunt has inside their house. Well, listen. It's her rules, man.
Yes, her rules. And if you want to have a really uncomfortable 3 hours at Christmas, that's your problem. Like if you want to fight it the whole time. And so sometimes I think it's definitely hits on the acceptance of like what's actually worth it,
Yeah.
acceptance of change in these contexts. And when I think about like kind of transitioning between kind of phases in time and like, oh, if I want to have things be a little bit different or to figure out what our like kind of norm is like the three of us like if I was like thinking about my sister and Charles if we're like going out someplace I'm like oh I want everyone to feel included I think about my like general philosophy and how would I do that probably not by excluding someone from conversation that's usually a good start.
I think so. I think so. That's a great place to start.
Yeah
And
just
to answer the question even of like how to adjust to the transition of becoming the newer version of you, because we're always adapting and shifting. That's also being curious about what your new rules and values are.
yeah. And this is like when I think about like a new like this year of like what would I want to do differently this year? I don't know. Do you know what you want to do differently this year?
I couldn't come up with something, honestly.
Okay, well, we are living different lives. A
I
little longer list.
really couldn't come up. Like I've been sitting for the past 4 days because Adriel, the day of New Year's, we went to LACMA Museum. Uh,
Yeah.
and that's where Adriel sat down in front of this like gorgeous piece of art and had like his new like goals for 2024 and like all the things he wanted to do. And I was just like, I have nothing. Like nothing. I just want to go with the flow. And I want a house. I want
Yes.
like,
Yeah. I've recently discovered that I'm not a go with the flow person.
oh, see, that's where we do live different lives.
Yeah, yeah. And by recently discovered, I mean, I was like, I think I'm pretty chill. And then every single person around me was like, you're not chill at all. And I was like, yes, I'm chill if I know exactly what's happening all the time and I planned it perfectly. Um, that's what chill people do.
That is what chill people do.
Yeah, they're just, constantly planning everything at every point in time. So on my list, I was like, I really want to focus on living my values. Like, and one of the ways that I was going to do that is like, I was getting, operationalizing that for myself was I want to make sure the way that I think about my own, like, kind of body aligns with what I would tell my niece.
Oh, I love that. Oh, that's beautiful. Well, and I think that's the piece where situations have to happen, like sitting with Charles and Sarah on a table and being like, why am I excluding my husband from this chat? Situations like that have to happen for the next time to be like, I'm not excluding him. I'm going to now live within my values.
Yeah, I like it. I think it's so important because, especially as my niece is 5, and one of the things that I've noticed is starting to hear my niece talk about different things like bodies and being like, oh, I want to make sure that she knows that like all bodies are good.
Mhm.
Like, and it started to shift the way that I think about myself because I'm like, I want I want to do things differently and I don't want her to carry the same kind of anxiety fear that maybe I've carried throughout my life, and starting to like kind of help her with that is going to be first like by doing something differently myself.
Yeah.
So definitely like as I'm thinking about like kind of transitioning of what does that look like day to day? That day to day probably involves like being mindful of like when I am like making a criticism. And so that idea of like kind of how we evolve is actually thinking through how does that show up day to day. And that's usually the instructions that I give somebody if like they're trying to make a change or evolving themselves in some way is first let's stop and notice, where are you seeing that behavior?
Yeah.
Is that behavior in the type of things that you put on your body, the things that you feed your body, the things that you do with your body, and starting to tackle the different areas.
Yeah. Mindfulness. And that's, I love that you pointed that out because that's the first thing that helps with any shift and transition. It's first mindfulness and noticing. It's not an automatic change. It's
Yeah.
never an automatic change. It's first noticing that you did it. First realizing and noticing, okay, I did it and I feel that I don't like it. And oh, that's the behavior. That's the thing that I need to start working to do differently. And then trying different ways to do it differently. And then adjusting and then learning your rules to how to do it. Because the one thing for every transition is that you're learning something new and you're not going to know it all until you go through the experience of it.
Yes, exactly. You need to not do it 100% correctly the first time in order to understand what that is.
Yeah. I love this. So that's another episode of Off the Clock Conversations with Lili and Lauren, all about transitions in our new home offices. Actually, if you guys
Yes.
noticed, we changed the setting this time.
Yes, I hung things up on the wall. I feel like that's an announcement I have to give clients. I'm like, I finally did it. It
Yes.
took me over a year, and I feel very proud.
I'm very proud of you. I love it. I love the whole simple. You're so simple and like straight to the point, and then I'm kaboom
Love it.
everywhere.
I like the boom.
Yeah, kaboom. Well, happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday.
Join us for another episode next Thursday. Hope you enjoy it. Bye.